Hey guys, what's up? Before we get started, I just want to go ahead and apologize ahead of time. I have felt like crap all week, so if my voice doesn't sound good or if my brain stops working mid-episode here or mid-video, please forgive me. My throat is absolutely killing me, but I love you guys, and I want you guys to be able to do as well as you possibly can on the test. So I hope this helps you out a little bit. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with the absolute and comparative advantage. Remember, countries that specialize in the production of goods, they choose to specialize in the production of goods in which their opportunity cost is the lowest. Remember, opportunity cost is the cost of the next best alternative. So when you're trying as a country to decide what you should specialize in, you need to look at, okay, if I produce item A, how many of item B am I giving up? If I want to produce item B, how much of item A am I giving up? So you've got to look at that, and that helps you determine what you're most efficient in producing. So you're looking at opportunity cost. You want that to be the lowest. So for number two, if we're talking about opportunity cost, if country A has a lower opportunity cost to produce tablets than country B, that means country A has a comparative advantage in tablet production over country B. Because, guys, when you're talking about the big difference between the absolute advantage and comparative advantage, absolute advantage is just showing you who produces the most. So if you're looking at total number of oranges produced in a country, whichever country produces the most oranges has the absolute advantage. You don't worry about opportunity cost and absolute advantage, just who's producing the most. And usually the larger countries are going to have the absolute advantage because they can produce more because they're bigger. But with comparative advantage, you're looking at opportunity cost. The country that has the lowest opportunity cost is going to be the country that has a comparative advantage in producing that particular good. And I'm going to get an example here in just a second where hopefully that'll make a little more sense. So number three, if country A can produce 14 laptops an hour and country B can produce 16 laptops an hour, that means country B has an absolute advantage in laptop production because they simply can produce more in that same hour. So if both countries have an hour to produce laptops, country B produces more of them. That means they have an absolute advantage. For number four, who is given credit for developing the concept of comparative advantage? That's a guy, a British economic philosopher named David Ricardo. Number five, who's given credit for the idea of absolute advantage? That is going back to the guy we've talked about all year long, and that is Adam Smith. Okay, so now let's look at this table down here. This is kind of what you will see on the test, except you won't have these numbers right here where it says opportunity cost. I just put that there so you can see it. You'll just have the raw numbers, the 60, the 40, the 50, the 25. So for number six, based on the table, which country has an absolute advantage in banana production? So remember, absolute advantage is just simply who produces more bananas. If you look at the numbers here, here's bananas produced. Brazil produces 40. Honduras only produces 25. So who has the absolute advantage? That would be Brazil because they produce more bananas. Now, comparative advantage is a little more complicated. This is where you have to look at the opportunity cost, and you have to calculate that. To calculate the opportunity cost here when it's an output problem, because this is showing you the output. It's not talking about the resources you put into it, the number of hours it takes to produce one banana. That's not what it's talking about. That would be an input problem. It's an output problem. It's talking about how many bananas are produced. So to do that, the formula says you have to calculate the opportunity cost by taking the production you're giving up and divide that by what you are actually producing. So if we're looking at orange production for the opportunity cost, you're going to go here. So if you're Brazil and you want to produce oranges, your opportunity cost would be the 40 bananas you're giving up divided by the 60 oranges you can produce. So what you're giving up divided by what you are producing. And that number comes out to 0.66. Now for Honduras, we do the same thing. We take, if you want to produce oranges, you're going to take what you're giving up, which is the 25 bananas you could produce in that 1 hour, and you're going to divide that by the oranges that you're able to produce, which comes out to 0.5. So to determine who has the comparative advantage in orange production, you look at who has the lower opportunity cost. And you see that Honduras' opportunity cost is 0.5. Brazil's opportunity cost is 0.66. That means Honduras has the comparative advantage because their opportunity cost is lower. If your opportunity cost is lower and you have a comparative advantage, that means your country should specialize in producing that good. So Honduras should specialize in producing oranges. Look over here and look at the opportunity cost of banana production. Brazil's banana production, their opportunity cost is 1.5. So for every banana they produce, they're giving up 1.5 oranges they could have produced. For Honduras, for every banana they produce, they're giving up 2 oranges they could have produced. So in this scenario, Brazil has a lower opportunity cost for producing bananas, which means they have a comparative advantage there. So you're talking about who should trade what with who. In this example, Honduras, since they have a comparative advantage, a low opportunity cost in producing oranges, they should produce oranges and trade those oranges with Brazil. Brazil should produce bananas because they have a low opportunity cost, comparative advantage, and trade those bananas for Honduras' oranges. That's how countries decide what they specialize in and what they should trade. Okay, let's move on to economic systems here really quickly. There's a couple questions about number 8 here. So if you are the government and your government is selling publicly owned assets, when we say publicly owned, that means the government owned. Publicly means government owned. So selling publicly or government owned assets to private businesses or people is called privatization. You're selling it to individuals, private individuals who are not necessarily associated straight with the government. Now the flip of that, if you are selling privately owned businesses or assets to the government, that's called nationalization. The nation is taking over those businesses or those assets. So if you're selling it to private businesses, it's privatization. If you're selling it to the nation, the government, to the public, the publicly owned part of that, that's going to be nationalization. So make sure you know the difference there. Number 9, which economic system favors a laissez-faire, did I say that right? Not sure. Laissez-faire policy of very little government intervention in the economy? That would be capitalism. Our 3 economic systems are capitalism, which is closer to what the U.S. has, communism, and socialism. Capitalism favors a laissez-faire policy with very little government intervention. Number 10, a country's balance of trade. Remember, you're talking about your balance of trade. That's just looking at, okay, where do you fall? Are you importing more than you're exporting? Are you exporting more than you're importing? So it's simply exports minus your imports. If a country has a positive balance of trade, that means they have a surplus. That means they are exporting, they're selling more goods than they're having to buy from other countries. You have a surplus. But if your imports are greater than your exports, that would mean that you are operating at a deficit. You are spending more money than you are making in revenue. But balance of trade is exports minus imports. Number 11, embargoes. We talked about this with Cuba. The United States had an embargo with Cuba. That's basically where you have restricted all trade, a complete ban on trade with a country for political reasons. You don't agree, like with Cuba, the United States did not agree with the communist government that they had. So we put an embargo on them to ban all trade to try to encourage them to change their government system away from communism. Okay, a little bit more about balance of trade. What is used to measure payments that flow between individuals and countries and all other countries, or between individual country and all other countries? That is the balance of payments. Okay, the balance of payments measures how the payments that are going from one country to the other. Are you buying things from them, or are they buying things from you? Number 13, a U.S. citizen buying stock in a Japanese-owned company would result in a what to U.S. financial account because money is flowing. So let's look at this here. Remember, credits and debits. A credit to your account means you're adding money to your account. You're earning money. It's like revenue. A debit to your account, like if you go to the store and swipe your debit card, you're spending money. They're taking money out of your account. So if a U.S. citizen buys stock in a Japanese-owned company, that would result in a debit to the U.S. financial account. Money's taken out of the U.S. financial account, and it is flowing out of the USA. A German citizen buying a shopping center in Athens, Georgia would result in a credit to the U.S. capital account because that German citizen, even though he's from Germany, is putting money into the U.S. economy. So that's money coming in as a credit to our account because money is flowing in to the USA. If your expenditures, this is balance of trade here. If your expenditures are greater than, are greater than your revenue, so if your exports are greater than your imports, that means you have a surplus. But, if you're spending more than you're making, that means you have a deficit. Sorry about that. If you're spending less than you're making, so if you're making more money than you're spending, that means you have a surplus. Okay? Trade barriers, talk about this today. Remember, a protectionist is someone who favors having trade barriers with other countries so that they can protect the industries inside your country, inside the United States. There's quite a few reasons that you would have a protectionist that would want to erect trade barriers. You want to protect domestic jobs would be one. Protect infant industries, those companies that are just getting started in the United States. You want to help them grow up. You want to protect the environment in developing countries. You want to make sure that you are protecting workers in developing countries from unfair labor practices. Those are all reasons that a protectionist would want to erect trade barriers with another country. How could a tariff protect domestic jobs? Remember, domestic means home, inside your home country, inside the United States. Well, a tariff, if you're remember, a tariff is a tax on imports. So if you want to buy something from Japan, you live in the United States, you have to pay an extra tax, a tariff, if we had a tariff on imports from Japan. What that would mean is people are less likely to buy products from Japan, people inside the United States, because you have to pay that extra tax to buy it. It's more expensive. So if people aren't buying those products from Japan, that means U.S. companies that make the same products are going to get more business because people are going to buy things from them instead of buying it from the companies in Japan. If people are buying more from those U.S. companies, they have more money, so they can hire more workers. And that's protecting domestic jobs. The Smoot-Hawley Act is definitely a protectionist piece of legislation because it tried to limit trade with foreign countries. It put a tariff on foreign imports. So that would they tried to protect jobs in the United States. It didn't really work out that well. It led to a slowdown in all trade around the country, almost a financial collapse, and a slowdown with all trade around the world, I should say, not just the country. So the Smoot-Hawley Act, what this did is it decreased international trade. Talked about a tariff. A tariff is an import, or it's a tax on imports. A maquiladora, sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, is basically a factory in Mexico that used to be located in the United States. Ford is an example of this. A lot of companies are doing this now because it's cheaper to have factories in Mexico because you don't have to pay the workers as much. So factories that used to be in the United States, like in Michigan with Ford, and they've now sent those jobs overseas to Mexico because they don't have to pay workers in Mexico as much as to pay workers in the United States, which is bad for people in the United States because jobs are leaving the country. But it also could be good because if Ford can produce their cars for cheaper in Mexico, the production costs are lower. That means they can charge lower prices to the consumer. So it's kind of good and bad. Number 24, NAFTA. What does NAFTA stand for? It stands for North American Free Trade Agreement. The purpose of NAFTA was to have free trade between the North American countries, Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and to kind of maximize their trading power. The major argument of opponents of NAFTA is that basically it doesn't really help the United States that much. It actually takes jobs out of the United States. Because think about it, if you're a company and workers in Mexico will work for a lot less than workers in the United States, well, you're going to put your factories down there and then just import the goods that they produce back in the United States because there's no tariff. It's free trade. You can produce it for cheaper down there and just send it for free back in the United States. So it really helps out Mexico and Canada, and it's not so good for the United States. They lose a lot of jobs. Or in some ways, it's not good for the United States. The European Union, a couple of benefits. It's easier to trade. It's not as complicated. The governments can save money because they don't have the exchange rates that they have to worry about. And also helps maximize their trading power in the international market. The design of the Euro bills, remember the front of the Euro bill, they have doorways to represent openness between the 27 members of the European Union. And on the back of the Euro, they have bridges that are supposed to represent the connectedness between those 27 countries in the European Union. Exchange rates are used to measure the price of one nation's currency in terms of another nation's currency. Number 30, what does it mean if a country's currency depreciates? That means the value of their currency is going down. It's worth less. If your country's currency is appreciating, for number 31, that means the value is going up. It is increasing in value. It's worth more compared to the other currencies. If over the course of 1 year the Mexican peso depreciates relative to the Japanese yen, which people would benefit the most from this? That would be the Japanese consumers of Mexican goods, because Japanese consumers will have it costs them less to buy things from Mexico because the Mexican peso has depreciated in value. It's kind of the same concept for number 33 there. Sorry guys, we're running out of time, so I'm trying to go quick. Number 34, if the Canadian dollar appreciates relative to other countries or other currencies, what impact would it have on Canadian trade? Well, imports into Canada would not decrease. What would be is exports from Canada will increase. Lower demand for U.S. exports will typically result in a decrease in the No, actually, it would decrease in the value of other currencies. So if the U.S. dollar gets stronger, it would be B, because U.S. dollar is stronger, then other countries can't afford to buy as much from from the U.S. So their value of their currency would decrease. Number 36, if an exchange rate is floating, that means that it goes up and down. So there you go, guys. I'm sorry I don't have any more time. We got through most of it there. Hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, just let me know. Good luck, guys.